What did you think of the Secretary of State's speech?
I thought it was incredibly statesmanlike. He did a fantastic job talking very much about the shared value system that created the greatest from the Western Alliance. And it was based upon this Judeo-Christian ethos that permeates in the soil led by America. And it's when we stand strong on our foundation, we succeed as an alliance. When we deter from that, when we take a detour from that, everything seems to fall apart. I thought he did a fabulous job of foreshadowing the future of America if we get immigration wrong, and or foreshadowing the future of Europe if they come back to this Western alliance, this ethos that permeates. By doing so, what you do, and Ben, is you start focusing on what we have in common. That purpose is incredibly important. We see that in the immigration policy here at home. We see that with the closed borders by President Trump here at home. We see that in focusing on free markets, capitalism, but most importantly, it is the foundation of values that has made America the most prosperous country on the planet. And it is what tethers us to this Western alliance. Is a value system that has to be protected. I've said it several times. You can't have multiple missions in a simple, singular alliance. It has to be one mission. That mission comes from our shared values. And anytime you allow immigration to confuse, to distort, and to try to have multiple missions, you always destroy the underlying country or alliance. And that's what I thought he did really well, speaking about our shared values and talking about how we can succeed together if we stand on those shared values.
And Senator Scott, one of the things that was pretty astonishing is the reception. So obviously it was a European audience, and the European audience was extraordinarily warm towards Secretary Rubio. He spoke many of the same sort of harsh truths to the Europeans, actually, that the vice president did a few months back. But this time they seem to be willing to hear them because, again, he began with the realization and the reality that the United States and Europe ought to be on the same side. He wasn't starting sort of from the point of taking a 2x4 to them. It was, listen, we want you to do better. If you are strong allies, if you join us in this mission, then we'll be able to walk into the future together. I thought it was a very encouraging, optimistic message. And I think that the Europeans responded to that, even though, again, he was saying some pretty harsh things to them.
I don't disagree with you, Ben. That's one of the reasons why I thought it was really important to reflect on why it was so successful. I think the foundation matters, but he also used a really important word, we. He said we a lot. Why? Because when you were talking, if you're going to be critical of someone and you start with the conversation, we need to do these things better, looking at what we've done well, contrasting where they've departed from what we're doing really well, that is a place where you can lean into the conversation. If you're going to critique your friends, you got to do so with love in your heart. You got to do so with this shared concept at the top of your mind. He did a really good job of articulating the necessary change in direction that we need to see from our European allies, and at the same time reinforcing the fact that it has been a Western coalition that has transformed everything we know in modern history since World War II. If we're going to have the kind of success we need to defend true, strong, universal values, it is better done as a team. But if you're not going to play by the same rules, the same values, the same objectives, the team will not abide. And I thought he did a really good job of articulating that with the concept of we, which is very important.
You know, by contrast, the Democrats in Munich, I thought, did a pretty shockingly bad job. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as I said earlier on the show, was taking her 2028 car out for a spin. It kind of spun out. It hit the embankment a few times. It was not a good look for AOC, aside from her pretty obvious gaffes saying that Venezuela was south of the equator and such. The general vision that she laid out for Western civilization is basically that the West is wrong. The West is bad. The West is the harbinger of evil. The West has been responsible for all the world's problems. And this is somehow why she should be a leader in the West. It's a bizarre, self-contradictory notion. What did you make of her speech in Munich and the rest of the Democrats in Munich?
Yeah, Ben, you hit the nail on the head. AOC did a terrible job. She seemed confused. She seemed to be completely without facts. And frankly, when she was talking about Taiwan, she was talking about a genocide, and she was sympathetic to Hamas when answering questions about Taiwan and China. It was really strong clear that she had no clue what she was talking about. But imagine then the split screen between AOC on one side and Marco Rubio on the other side. It gave America a great contrast on what we could have for a future and what we would be afraid of for a future. I think President Trump made a fantastic decision choosing Marco Rubio as our Secretary of State and seeing him on one part of the split screen and AOC talking about everything that seemed to be un-American while he was talking about everything that makes America great. She was talking about things that were confusing, and he was very clear. She was talking about having sympathy for Hamas and for people who caused nearly a genocide, while he was talking about defending the values here that are clear. He did such a great job. We could almost breathe a sigh of relief that President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, has chosen well for our nation and for our future. And at the exact same time, Democrats say AOC. That's why, as a party, the Republican Party, we need to remember that the road to socialism runs right through a divided Republican Party. And it is incredibly important that we keep America's future as paramount and winning elections as the next major step in the right direction of having the kind of future that Marco Rubio articulated and laid out for this Western alliance. It starts all in America, though.
I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that AOC was doing over there, she was talking a lot about class consciousness. It was a very Bernie Sanders speech. Obviously, some of the people who helped her craft it are on the Bernie Sanders team, including one Matt Duss, who is a former foreign policy advisor to Bernie Sanders. The Bernie Sanders view of the world is essentially a class-based view of the world in which any country that is rich is exploitative, that the people who have made that country rich are the exploiters, and that there must be some sort of gigantic class uprising. If that sort of philosophy is mirrored on the right, that is a gigantic category error. The right in the United States and in Europe has to be based on, again, that shared fundamental value system that includes things like rule of law and equal protection of the laws. And yes, private property and the possibility of upward mobility and economic progress.
Yes. Well, without any question, if you look back at the 250 years of American history, the one thing we have to conclude is that starting with the right foundation is a necessary component for all the success that we've seen. Going back to our Declaration of Independence and having a conversation about how our Creator gave us inalienable rights, that is the value proposition that the world needs to take a strong look at. And from that, you can create an objective standard that has the rule of law applied fairly across the board, makes America the envy of the world. It is that value system that allows for me, a poor kid born in 1965 in the Deep South, to believe that the American dream is coming not only to the South, but to my zip code. And as a result of that, I sit in front of you as a United States Senator. Why? Because America's values, we had to fight for them. We had to fight, frankly, in our own country for them, but we did that. And the last 30 to 40 years of American history has been the fastest in history of progress for all people. Something the world looks back and says, how did that happen? It happened because we stood on the right foundation and we were willing to fight for the future that our Declaration of Independence said should be ours. And AOC and the Democrats fight against our value proposition, against a singular focus of purpose for our nation. They fight for something we as Americans would call un-American. And that is the contrast that we'll see in 28 and beyond. When I say the road to socialism, Ben, I mean it sincerely. The thought of meritocracy is something the Democrats and the liberals are allergic to. I am so thankful that we have rules of the road, that we have an objective standard that allows for the poorest kid like me to literally start a business and change my financial future. I am so thankful that we have a contrast between strong education systems around the country and the weakest in the nation in places like Chicago, 13 school districts in Maryland, where the average, well, frankly, only 1% of the kids can read at grade level. We have an opportunity to see what works in America versus what doesn't work in America. And what you'll find very consistently, what works in America comes from conservative values, and what doesn't work comes from a socialist paradigm. spreading throughout parts of the country by AOC Mamdani and others.